Welcome to our first Fireside Room Adult Forum of the Fall 2013 season. We are delighted that you are here, and especially delighted because this morning we are launching a new series. As you know, this morning is the beginning of a new 40-day adventure here at Zumbro. We're calling it God's Calling. It's a chance for us to explore all of the things God is doing in us and through us, sometimes things that we know, sometimes things that we don't realize until later. As Pastor Vern quoted Soren Kierkegaard this morning, life is lived forward but understood backward. And this is a chance for us to do a little looking ahead and also some reflecting. Here at the Adult Forum for the next 6 weeks, we're going to be trying something a little bit different. We're having a chance to hear some stories. If you're like me, you are inspired by other people's stories. Maybe their experience gives a chance for you to see what God has been up to in your own life. And so for most of this 6 weeks, we are going to be connecting with folks here at Zumbro and finding different ways that God has been at work in and through them. Sometimes things that they've seen way far in the future, sometimes things that they haven't realized until they've had a chance to look back, and sometimes things that they're still trying to figure out. And our hope is that as you hear their stories and interact with their questions, you're listening for God's voice in your own life and finding ways that God is using you to bless and serve the world. For these 6 weeks, as I mentioned, you'll be hearing from different members of our congregation. We're trying a little bit of a different format too. They'll have a chance to share their stories for a while, and then members of our continuing education team are going to serve as the Oprah among us, and they're going to facilitate some conversation with them. Hence the great high top table and comfy chairs and a cup of coffee. And then you'll have a chance to ask questions and find out more about their own stories. You'll also be learning more about people that you maybe have never met before. We've got folks who are going to be presenting ranging in age from, I don't know how old you are, Bernadette, young, very young, retired people all the way down. We've got a couple of college students and folks all over in between. So I invite you to bring your thinking caps, bring your heart, and enjoy the stories today. And I will turn it over now to Paula Crago, our host for the day, and she will introduce our speaker.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Bernadette Scharpen and I are on the Adult Education Committee. One of the things that we do, is that better?
Yes.
Is plan and execute, that's not maybe a good word, the adult. So prior to embarking on this, I didn't know Bernadette that well. You've been coming to Zumbro now for 2 years. And the story that she has volunteered to share with you is as we look at callings and things that lead people to make a midlife reversal or change. And in her case, it's been a big change in her personal life and loss. We often think about people going through certain natural disasters, big things that can cause, a true transformational experience like Martin Luther during the thunderstorm. But there's also a lot of storms that we all encounter in life. And as I worked with Bernadette on this and got to know her, I realized that she really does have a calling to share what she has learned. And I'm delighted to be here with her to do that. And I'll turn it over to her this morning.
Thank you, Paula. One of the great benefits of agreeing to do this is to have met Paula and all the people I've been working with. So thank you for being here. Having been a former teacher and consultant training and all of that, I shouldn't be at all nervous about this. But when do you ever get a chance to just talk about yourself? So that is a whole different thing. And to know that this many of you are taking the time to come down and let me talk about myself, I'm grateful, I appreciate it. I have been on a journey, and I'm going to share with you the journey that I have been experiencing. As Pastor Shelley said, I'm going to talk about what I'm seeing as my calling today, that a year ago I had no clue as to who I was, what my purpose was anymore, and it was all related to the passing of my husband. And in that year, I went through several things to get to this place where I can stand here today and feel confident and proud that I have been able to reach that place where I'm excited about the second half of my life. I don't really think about myself as making a great transition. I still feel like service has always been my goal, but I know that I'm in the second half of my life, and I think too frequently we look at the second half of our life and we retire, which I hate the word, hate it. It's an ugly word, it's a negative word, it's the gesture done. I'll never use it. I've always preferred the word refire, and that's what I intend to do. I just never really knew that I would go through so much to get to that place where I was excited again to refire. So I'll give you a little bit of background first of all. Back in May of 1992, that would be how many years? Forget it. It seems like yesterday, but at that point I was a single woman. I was divorced, had been for 10 years, had been taking care of 3 children. The youngest was 3, 5, and then 5 and 12 when I was divorced. I was divorced for 10 years. I had no interest in men on a permanent basis. I had no interest in ever getting married again. I thought that part of my life, I had done that. Now my goal was to be a good mom and to pursue the career that I love. Something changed. A dear friend of mine who was dating a man who was a friend of this person I'm going to call, who is named Denny, my husband. And she said, I met somebody through her friend, and she says he's a part of their church. And she says, I really think you two should meet. Here we go. And she said, can he just call you? So I said, sure. Well, on May 31st, Labor Day, he called. And we had such a great conversation, and I think Pastor Vern would attest to this, having met Denny. He immediately caught my attention. The conversation was fun, it was interesting, and I laughed, and we didn't know each other from Adam, and it was okay. We spent about 45 minutes on the phone. Of course, at that point, I'm going to have coffee with him, right? So I met him, and not too long after that, this happened. Oh dear. That's not what happened. All right, I gotta go back to slideshow. Right? That's right, I'm on slideshow. And so now I gotta be here. What you're about to see is a younger woman and her man. So anyway, it was about a year and a half, that's all it took. And it only took a short time because there was one thing about Denny. He was a charmer, and he would read books with me. And I took that one thing and said, any guy that will be interested in reading and talking about how to build your relationship, and they were relationship books we would read, in communication, I thought, he's a keeper. And apparently he liked what he saw also, so we got married in 1992. And so okay, good. And so the next picture is going to show you who we put together. We put together his 3 children, and well, actually, in our home, we put together 5 kids, 3 cats, and a dog. Now, you have to be good at communicating and building relationships when you're doing that. And these are all the kids, and I realized as I was putting this together that I don't have any of them when they were first. This is like 6 or 7 years later when my daughter got married, and I thought, well, of course I don't. We didn't have time for pictures. We were making meals and doing things. His 2 children were in their 20s. We didn't want them to feel displaced. They were living with him. We said, come on, we're all going to live together and we're going to bond. And they had a year is what we gave them. So we knew the 5 kids, 3 cats, and a dog was going to be short-lived. His oldest son was also already out of the house. It didn't take long. My daughter was off to college and we were down to just my 2 youngest boys, who were like 12 and 14. So we had a great Brady Bunch experience, and it was a good one. It really was, but it was a testimony to a good person, ability to compromise and so forth. Those are all the happy moments that then were interrupted by a diagnosis, and that was in 1996, so it would have been 4 years after we got married that Denny was diagnosed with advanced cancer. And that's one of the photos of him. So for 16 years, he fought advanced cancer. We fought advanced cancer. We went through radiation. We went through chemotherapy. We went through clinical trials. We went through one drug after another, and fought a good battle, 16 years. It's what brought us to Rochester. It was a lot of trips we were making to Rochester, and we decided, he always felt when he walked into the Mayo Clinic, so those of you who are a member of that society, he felt like you put his arms around him. He always said when he walked in there, he just felt like he was cared for and taken care of. And so, we had a long period of just fighting to live and have fun together. He was a great dancer, another positive thing, by the way. This is a photo of, in 2011, the Mayo Clinic diagnosed him with a condition that was not treatable. And this would have been taken in 2011 when we became part of hospice and had the hospital bed in our home and the great care of hospice and visits from Pastor Byrne. And but in 2011, the doctor said, it's not treatable, go home, you have days to live. Now this would have been just a week or so before Father's Day and his birthday. And doctor said, you don't have time. If you want to celebrate those holidays, celebrate them now. And so we did. We called everybody in, and we had Father's Day, and we celebrated his birthday, and everybody from all over the country came in to see him. And he, as a testimony to the kind of person he was, made a phone call to every single person he knew that he wanted to say goodbye to. He said goodbye to them. Many people have commented on what that meant to them, how heartfelt that was, and how much dignity he was giving to the process of dying. Well, Father's Day came, birthday came, the real thing. We got the kids all together again, and we celebrated it again. And of course, we had many jokes and laughter about, Daddy, what are you trying to do to us here? Are you teasing? And so, you know, that's just the way it went, but it went that way for 9 months. And we're sitting there, and he's in the hospital bed, and we're sitting there, we're saying, we gotta quit dying and start living. We're waiting to die all this time. So we sent the hospital bed away and we began to travel again. This is a picture of him in California where he visited his sister. Now, was it easy? No. I mean, he was sick there. There was a place at which I thought maybe I wouldn't be bringing him home alive, but he visited his sister and he had a great time. And his sister made it all very comfortable for him. We had many family events after that were not anticipated. It was quite an experience to watch a man be so sure about where he was going that he could set that aside and live every day to its fullest. And he did. And besides, I think that, well, he was a Stevens minister in his church, so he was a very faithful person. And the children's mother had died, and she died of suicide. And as a result, he, in order to deal with his grief, he started a suicide support group. The first one, I believe, in Minnesota. And for 10 years, he facilitated those kinds of groups. So God had been preparing him for this. There was no question in my mind. The strength that he had was coming from his having helped so many people himself. But we traveled, we visited, there were more grandchildren born. By the way, we have 13 right now. And I say we because his children are my children, their children are my grandchildren. We are a big family and I love it. 13 grandchildren. This picture itself, yeah, let's stay on that one for a minute. This picture itself was taken 1 week before he died. He was out on the golf course with his son. And Randy had no idea that he would try to golf, but he had brought his golf club, and he was out there doing a little putting and so forth. So, and then July 2012, he passed away. Mayo Clinic called him Lazarus. After his death, and you think he had 16 years to prepare. We were always thinking positive. We always had goals. We're always setting goals and looking to the future. And when we had a celebration of his life, the kids had put together a slide presentation with music, and it was so special, and it was happy, and all of the things that Dad had meant to them was included in that. And after the celebration of life, everybody went home. Everybody was gone. And that's when it hit me. I was alone. I was lost. I was completely lost. I had never shed so many tears, and I had not shed that many tears through this whole process. But being in that house alone, I couldn't touch his things. It just started moving them. I couldn't touch his things for almost a year. And I hit bottom. I know I did. I know I was starting to feel depressed. I was starting to feel like life was over. Like me, who always believed I had so much more I was going to do. I didn't know what it was because I had lost my reason. I had retired for 2 years before this and to take care of him, and that was my purpose. I wasn't ready, whatever that word there, I used it. But that's what it was there. So all I knew was I had to get my feet on the ground. Pastor helped me. He recommended some books. I brought a couple of them here. One of them they're over there, Falling Upward. You cannot go forward without going backwards. It's the essence of what I found in a lot of the reading. I also had another one Pastor recommended, which is Finding Your Place at the Fire. I'm one of those that has to do something. So I said, I gotta go find my roots. I'm lost. It's like an immigrant being shoved off into the water and I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing. I gotta go find my roots, I gotta find out. So off I went to find my roots, which is in the Adirondack Mountains. That's from the window of my bedroom in northern New York. I spent about 4 weeks there, just talking to cousins and going to grave sites, and we could just keep going. There's pictures of my church. That's my grandparents' house. I went in there, my cousin's living there, they remodeled it. I got to talk to them about all those changes. This is the church I was married in, the church I went to with my parents as a child. And all of that did ground me, because what it gave me was my values. My parents had done a good job with core values, but I'd forgotten, and one of them was family, and I began to think more about me by doing that. The other part about returning to my roots is I do have some Native American Indian heritage. And one of the things I get to do twice a year is to go to the BANFF Institute. This is the BANFF Leadership Institute. If you've ever been to BANFF, you know how beautiful that is. And I get to teach there, but I get to learn about my culture, because I teach Indigenous First Nation groups. And I've attended powwows and sweat lodges, and nothing I knew anything about, but what I realized was how important family is, and how important it is to be an elder. And how life is not over with that first part of your life. The second part of your life, as an elder, you have a role and you have a responsibility, and First Nations community do a beautiful job with using the wisdom of people who are in that second half of their life. All that helped me. I'll show you another picture of that beauty. It's a spiritual retreat every time I go there. I therefore, after returning to my roots, the next thing that was important to me was to immerse myself in family. And my dear neighbors, Marge is here, she's one of them, she'll tell you, they didn't know where I was when. I was gone all the time. I went to California and stayed with Denny's sister and just shared stories and so forth for weeks. I spent time in New York, I spent time in Colorado Springs, which I think is my next picture. Oh, Denny's sister just had her 80th birthday when I was out there, and so we got to spend that time together, just reconnecting, staying connected to that family. My son is in Colorado Springs. I spent weeks with him several times. He's a philosopher, artist, that kind of, so the talk was great. And you know what? They all kept welcoming me, so I kept going. Been a year of great travel. Then I realized how family feeds the spirit. And so as I started to bring myself back home, the grandchildren, 13 of them, they're beautiful. Are they beautiful or what? I decided I'm the elder now. I've got to be sure they understand my connection to them. I take them out on their one-on-ones. And we have one-on-one days with each one of them. Those were some of the 4 of the 13 of them. Another important part of what happened to me this year was the voice of God. This is a rainbow that formed as I was out in New York finding my roots. You tell me, have you ever seen a rainbow like that? It was a double rainbow. It extended from one end of Lake Champlain to the other. It was nothing ever like it. It was posted in the paper the next day. That was God. And I turned it upside down and I said, that's a smile, that's Denny. He knows what I'm doing and he likes it. I couldn't deny that was, and rainbows were showing up all over the place. And God is not loud. He's silent, and he was telling me subtly, keep going, you're doing the right thing. This is after 2 or 3 frosts. I come walking out of my house, headed to another trip, Colorado Springs, and there was this beautiful flower just popping right out of the dirt, smiling at me. The plant was dead. I see that as God saying, you're on the right path. This is a wonderful story. This is the Star of David. My son took the picture in Colorado shortly after Denny died. So he's talking to us. And then that boy had been married 8 years and wasn't able to have a child. They weren't able to have a child. He and I and she headed out to Montreal, where Mount Royal is, a special place where people would go and ask for special favors from God, and there were crutches and wheelchairs and everything left there by a man who was called Brother Andrew at the time, and in 2010 there was no scientific reason why the miracles had taken place there, and he was made canonized and is a saint. He happens to be on my family tree. So we decided to go. That was the place to go. We lit a candle. We prayed. We prayed for me. We prayed for Dustin and his wife. This, did you see this? This drawing or this? This is the ceiling of my son's nursery. They went in there one day after the baby was born. Yes, 2 months after they came back, she became pregnant, and they have a beautiful, beautiful little boy. And they went in there, and there was the Star of David in the ceiling of the nursery. I mean, doesn't that look the same? God has been talking to me all year, for my son, but for me too. They have a beautiful, beautiful child. And then I have a problem with doing too much sometimes and multitasking and not getting quiet. And I began to realize God's talking to me more than I'm hearing. And it was important for me to establish a quiet corner. And that quiet corner is this in my sunroom, and that's my chair. And it's in my chair that I'll frequently use every morning, but it's where I read these beautiful books. It's where I meditate. I take the sermons. I don't always get the church pastor, but I take the sermons and I have them, and that's where I read them. And so often there's a connection that God is speaking to me. So those are the processes that I discovered and have helped put my feet on the ground so that I can be proud and confident again that I have a calling. God's been working on me since I was born. I've been a teacher, and I had to make more money, so I went into the corporate world. But what did I train? I trained personal development, I trained self-esteem things, I trained service, I trained supervisor, relationship things. God's got a purpose for me. And He's put me through a lot of, I had cancer when I was 36 with 3 kids after a divorce. Been a lot of transitions in life that somehow I survived. And it's my belief that my calling today, where I still feel like there's a place for me to work on a part-time. I'm too young to quit. I don't like that retirement thing. There's still, but more importantly, in the second half of my life, there's a place for me to serve. If I can help people going through the grieving process, I feel I have the credibility to do that now. And I want to do that. If I can help people going through divorces, I just have to find my way. This is all new for me. But that, I think, is what I discovered through experiencing these things, is my calling. And I like the whole idea that we're talking about calling right at the right time for me, because it's what I needed. And I'm finding it. And you've let me share it. So I really appreciate that. That's my story.
That was fabulous. Thank you so much.
We didn't talk about myself that long.
So as we've, Bernadette and I have met, and we've kind of gone over the story, I had some questions that I wanted to explore with her a little more in depth. And we will have some time left for the end for y'all's questions as well. So, Denny would read books about relationships with you, and this made a big impression on you. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, how many of you have ever met a man that would read books about relationships? It really was very, very, made a huge difference because I'm a reader. I know that if you read, you learn. I'm a learner, and he taught me that he was a learner. And so we would sit down, we read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Great book to be with a man who will read it with you and you say, do you do that? We had a great time talking about what was in those books.
He also was a Stevens minister after going through what must have been a very difficult time with his wife's suicide. I was not familiar with the Stevens ministry. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I didn't know him when he was doing that, but it's part of, I believe it's a Catholic service group. Is it Lutheran?
I think.
Oh, thank you. And so what it is people get trained on communicating and listening and helping those who are in need, and then the church will send them out to where the need is. And like I said, I wasn't a part of his life when he was doing that, but he was one of those folks.
It sounds like significant things about who he was, he expressed through helping others and being in relationship with others more broadly. And as I've gotten to know you, I realized that this is also significant about you. And I wondered, how does your call to serve differ from Denny's?
We were so much alike in many, many, many ways. That's why I feel like I was blessed with a soulmate. And so it's not a surprise to me to come to that place where I am. He'd be so proud of me right now because he always said, volunteer work is food for the soul. And he'd be so happy for me to know that I am interested in doing that. And how it's different, probably because I'm a trainer, coach, personal development kind of person, that I probably will want to share skills where he was a good listener and repeated back and so forth. I like to also provide a few skills along with that.
One thing I really sort of took for myself from the story of him being told he just had a little time to live, and you kept waiting and preparing to die, and realized that you're waiting, you had all this time, stop waiting and live. And I was struck by there's probably a lot of ways that we wait and things that we wait for that keep us from focusing on today. And that was really a powerful story, I thought. But I've experienced chronic disease through my immediate family, with my mother in particular, and found that one of the burdens of disease, in addition to the physical symptoms and limitations, is this mental burden, the difficulty in enjoying the day at hand while making plans for both the positive and negative aspects. And I think that getting a diagnosis of a chronic illness, if you have 3 months, you can kind of marshal all your forces for those 3 months, but when it goes on for a long time, it's like it's flinging the uncertainty of life in your face every day. And that can be difficult to get through. So how did you and Denny deal with this on a day-to-day basis? What kept you going?
Positive thinking, believing. We had an agreement that if one of us started to talk about, well, he lived a good life, he said once, he didn't say it again. And I would say, well, if we're able to, let's, and you would check me too. We always tried to keep the picture positive, so that if we decided, we had a fishing trip planned for him the week after he died. God intervened, and it was the best thing that we didn't go, because it wouldn't have been a good place for him to get as sick as he did. But we always were thinking, if we can do this, let's just keep going. And we did a lot of things that we wouldn't have done. And I think that's what hit me so hard, because all of a sudden the brakes were on and I couldn't think that way anymore. It's probably why it is. It still is. I still cry a lot.
You went through a really tough time, and I've not gone through that kind of loss, but I know that when what my family refers to as the festivities are over and everyone goes home, that's kind of the hardest time. Do you feel that, and you were in a pretty dark place, do you feel that was something you had to go through to that extent? Was there anything that could have lightened the burden, or do you think that was just an inescapable part of moving on?
I think like it is spoken with so many things, you kind of have to get bottom in order to really shake yourself a bit and say, well, all right, what are you going to do about this? I did have friends that, in the middle of the night I called and they would talk to me. I had permission to call. I had dear, dear neighbors that were always there for me. Marge gave Debbie his last meal, strawberry rhubarb pie. Remember that? I had dear, dear, dear loving family and friends, but I had to have bottom.
I like the 4 processes that you created or identified. The returning to your roots, God appearing to you and you seeing that, immersing in your family, which sounded like it was just a wonderful thing to do, and then learning that you needed to focus in order to listen. And we were both struck by Candy, that was at the service last week, who asked, why does God whisper? And that's so that we will come closer, so that we can listen. And I also thought God whispers to us to force us to focus and face Him, because when someone says something to you and you don't hear it, you turn and you say, make that eye contact, get closer. I also liked what you said about God had been preparing me for the second half of my life since I was born. So God prepared you, but you also, like that quote of Kierkegaard from Pastor Burns' service, you kind of construct it backwards as well, make those connections.
That was an important quote. That's why I just returned to my roots somewhere. I picked that up probably from Pastor Burns, surely from the books, but I knew I had to go back home. That's where I had to begin.
And I was also interested in your work with the First Nations people. And what are some of the things that you learned in that work?
One of the classes I teach is leadership skills for Indigenous women. That's really exciting. And the other one is strategic planning. These are week-long workshops. They begin with a prayer. They begin with the introduction to the elder who is there the whole session. The elder is available to speak to any young person who may be struggling, who may be wanting to just talk about life or whatever. I'm struck by, now I'm seeing the positives in that setting, without a doubt. I am struck by how the wisdom of the elders and how the respect is given to them and how easy it is for them to be in their second half of their life and share what they've learned. And I think that what I would like to be is the new elder. I think we need more of that in our world. So that's one of the things, the lack of materialism, the focus on things that are important, not on the superficial stuff that gets focused on. And when I did my first sweat lodge, I had no idea. But I had loving people around me. They were encouraging. I said, Bernadette, just come for an hour, just come for 20 minutes to see. And there we are in a circle. And everybody's praying for each other. And they're telling their stories. And people are crying for each other. they get so close. There were some ceremonies with some incidences that just struck me as very, very special, and I think that part of my career was brought to me because I do have Native heritage.
One of the things that I was struck by, a gift I heard in this, is that you were open to that you maintain an openness to new experience. And I know sometimes I struggle with that, a little bit of cautiousness, what will happen, it won't be under control, but I really respect
They had
that.
to nudge me,
Yeah.
but they did.
And reassure. And I want to open it, I have a couple of questions to close with, but I wonder what questions y'all might have for Bernadette. And Pastor Shelley will do the Phil Donahue to my Oprah.
I never knew I was going to be on Oprah.
One thing I was also struck by is when you're in a period of grief, I think you're open to things that you're not open to sometimes at other points. I had just a really very surprising experience after I lost my grandmother, who I was named after and I was very close to, where for some weeks music sounded wonderful and colors were brighter, and it was almost like this gift that I got where everything just seemed so intense and beautiful. And the other experience I had was when we took my dad to bury him in the cemetery next to his mother in Texas, for about a 200-mile drive with the caravan. And I have to intersperse this story on the way because we're going through this small town in Texas, and there are these 3 big black stretch limos pull in, with the hearse and then this flower van. We all get out, and I have some really good-looking female relatives, and they're all skinny and wearing black suits and big sunglasses, and all these muscular cop-like looking guys are getting out. And this guy in the gas station comes up to my younger sister and he says, "Who are y'all with?" And she said, "My dad." So at any rate, we got to the cemetery, and I have some Native Indian relatives as well. I have a little bit in the background, but I also have full Indians that are married in, because we're from Oklahoma and Texas. And it's always great seeing them. But I found this little bird feather as I was getting out of the car, and for some reason I looked at it and I just thought it was my dad, because he was career Air Force. We did that Airman's Prayer at his funeral, and I picked that feather up and I carried it until it disintegrated. And I'll see a feather and I just think about my dad, and it just gives me this warm, connected feeling. So I just wonder if anyone's had these sort of little irrational but helpful experiences that they want to share, or any thoughts on that? Yes. Bill's coming.
I appreciate all your comments about nature and plant life and, the beauties surrounding us. You did mention you had several pets, cats and a dog. Did they play any role in your healing?
I have no pets now. I was always of the belief that with children comes pets. And when the children all were gone and the last pet was in pet heaven, there were no more pets. So I guess, and I've been struggling with wanting a pet. But I also want to be able to spontaneously decide I want to go here and go and buy. So I don't have any now.
You had some, I asked you also if there were Bible verses that had spoken to you and had been helpful. I think this is one you selected.
Right, trust in the Lord with all thy heart and lean not unto thy own understanding. I have learned that. That There is nothing anymore. I'm still learning how to pray publicly or to put those words, being a former Catholic, I think, but to put those words in a way that I pray to God in a more genuine, sincere way. I was brought up memorizing prayers, and I'm working hard on understanding God and being able to speak to Him better, because I am so sure that I can lean on Him. And He will direct my path, help me know. In all thy ways, acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths. He's been doing that. I've always wondered, how did I get this work at BANFF? And I won't go into it, but I mean, it just sort of just happened, and it was so coincidental that I happened to know this one person who happened to feel I was pretty good at what I did, who happened to not show up one time or be able to show up one time for one of the sessions, and made a recommendation. I didn't know her very well. To this day, I haven't seen her for years, but that just happens. And it's like, there's so many, how did I get to Zumbro? And meet the wonderful, wonderful staff here. It just, there's no explanation except that God's been directing and leading the path.
I also think that God, you kept doing the work. You were prepared, and you could see the opportunity, take advantage of it, and God had led you to do those things. That's right.
I just want to thank you for sharing your story. I thought it was wonderful. I felt like I could relate to you in a lot of things, like always wanted to go somewhere, do something, never really staying grounded. The Bible verse, be still and know that I am God, that one I have to remind myself on a daily basis, because lately I've not been taking that time to sit and be quiet. I'm in school, I work 2 jobs, I have 2 kids, I have a dog. So it's busy, life is busy, and I found it so interesting that we don't hear God, we don't pay attention, we get so wrapped up in our own lives, materialistic things and superficial things, and when you hit bottom, God speaks to you through nature because He is nature, and when you are desperate, grasping for anything at all, and you can see God in just the smallest things like the flower or the rainbow, I just thought that was something really special, and I'm going to have to create a quiet corner. So thanks for that suggestion. But thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome. Remember, you're not in the second half of your life.
No, I am not.
And I look at my children, 3 kids, full-time job, scouts, all that, and I think, oh, I can't wait till they can sit in their quiet corner. But do it when you can.
I will.
I'm really looking forward to telling Elizabeth I want 13 grandchildren.
Her story reminds me a little bit of our niece, whose husband died in a car accident. And she had 3 little children all in school, and she was devastated. And finally she met a real nice man who had 2 children, and they moved in together, bought a house together, and had raised 5 children. And now he died suddenly too. But anyway, how did you come to Zumbro?
How did I come to Zumbro? Well, Denny and I were searching for a place where we felt comfortable, and we had gone to several churches in the area. My dear neighbor and Denny's cousin Marge is a good Zumbro member, and she brought us here maybe several times until we decided, that feels good. It felt right for us, and it's even more right for me now.
I think we're blessed that you're here.
God bless you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I was really nervous. I'm glad I'm here.
thank you very much for all your attention, and thank you so much, Bernadette. I've really enjoyed the time I spent with you, and this has just been a great session.
I hope we're friends forever.
We will be.
Thank you to all of you. Next week, as we gather here, we will be hearing the story of Katie Nelson. Katie is a college student who has had great experience in her lifetime, and you will find her absolutely fascinating and delightful. I look forward to introducing you to Katie next week. Thanks for coming.